Welcome back to my workshop. Now today is a very special video for me. I've been asked by another maker if I can make them a sign for their workshop. But before we get into that, I just want to say thank you to Ian, the Essential Handyman, who sent me a sticker, and I promised I was going to send him one back, but I haven't done it yet. Check out Ian's channel. Okay, he basically tells you a spade's a spade. He knows what he's talking about. He does some excellent tool reviews. Yeah, give him a check out. Right, okay, to the project today. I've been asked to make a workshop sign for Dan at the Sidings Workshop. That's this one. Okay, now Dan does some fantastic projects. Most of his stuff is on Instagram at the moment. Hopefully he's going to start a YouTube channel soon, properly. But some of the stuff he's doing like this is fantastic. Yeah, it's really good quality stuff. Check him out on Instagram if you can. I'll put a link here somewhere or here. Okay, so basically I've got to make a workshop sign. Most of it's going to be done on the CNC machine, and what I'll do is I'll talk you through the process of making a sign. Right, let's get over to the CNC machine. Okay, so I do have some limitations on the size of thing I can make on the CNC machine, because there's obviously only a certain width and a certain height I can go to. Now obviously Dan hasn't told me the size of the sign he wants, but obviously I don't want it too big, otherwise it will take up too much tool space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it as big as I can on here, and I'm going to use what wood I've got available, which is not a lot at the moment. I've got loads of pieces of wood, but none of them are big enough. Okay, but first of all, let's use Vetric Aspire and make a design. Right, going to run through this very quickly. First of all, open Vetric Aspire. You've got to create a new workpiece and set the dimensions of your piece of wood. Okay, we know how thick that is. Okay, the thickness in this case is 18mm. Our reference point is in the middle. It's in metric. We're not worried about these two bits at the moment. And okay, so now we've got our workpiece and we've got a design. So we have to import that, but it's a picture. So we find our picture, and then what we have to do is convert this picture into a vector. Okay, so once we've found our picture, here it is. Okay, that imports it as a picture. Now what we're going to do is, because this is black and white, we're going to select the picture and then select the colours that are in it, which we know is obviously black and there's some greys. Okay, so we've got to find the right colour grey. As soon as we've got the right colour grey, the wording will turn green. That means we know the computer recognises it. So we know if it recognises it, then it can convert it into a vector. Okay, so that's what we've got to do. Okay, I didn't save it then. We're going to go through the process again. Select the dark colour, select the lighter grey. Then we have to preview it. Okay, we're happy with that, and apply it. Okay, so now we've got two things here. We've got the vector, which is this bit, and we've also got the picture, which is that bit, which we don't need anymore, so we can delete that. Okay, now we've got our vector. That means the computer can recognize this. We can rescale it to whatever size we need, and we can center it by pushing this button, select to center, and it puts it in the middle of the workpiece. Okay, the scaling looks good. Have a quick scan to make sure there's no open vectors or breaks in the words. Once we're happy with that, then we'll save it. Okay, this might be necessary because we might need to use it separately later on. Okay, so we save this somewhere where we know, and we can get to it later. Right, so now we need to know what it's going to look like when we carve it. So the first thing to do is got to tell it what we're going to carve it with. So we're going to use a V-bit. I'm using a 60-degree V-bit, which is 13mm wide, and I was basically set here all the dimensions and the behavior of the CNC machine, including the spindle speed, which is 10,000, and the plunge rate, etc. Okay, once I've applied that, then we can then have a look to see what it's going to look like when we carve it. Okay, so we calculate that, have a quick preview. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, very quick look, but the problem is where it says the Sidings Workshop looks fine, but the smaller text doesn't look so good. Now that's probably because the bit I'm using in my spindle is going to be too big to do the small text. So what I have to do is split this vector into two pieces, the main text and then the subtext. Okay, so we have to split that up into its original parts. Okay, and then select the first pass we want to do, which is going to be the big words. Okay, same again, select the same tool, have a quick check to see what it's going to look like. Okay, so you can see we've just got the big words and the smaller text isn't there. We can save that as G-code, which is what the other programs are going to use to actually do the carving. So we call it whatever we're going to call it. This is the main text, obviously. And we save that where we know we can get it later on. Close that. Okay, then we have to go back to the drawing, unselect that, and then select the smaller text. Now obviously we are now going to use a smaller bit in the spindle, so we customize that again. Now I know this one's 3mm wide at 20 degrees, I believe. Same spindle speed, but the plunge rate I'm going to knock it down a little bit just to make sure it doesn't break anything. Okay, once we're happy with that, then we can preview that again. We clear it so we haven't got the big text. We're only looking at this small text now. Do a quick preview, and with that smaller bit it looks like we can get some decent definition. Okay, so we're happy with that. We go through the same process again, save it as G-code. Obviously we're going to call this something different, probably subtext, and then we can find that again when we use Mach 3 to do the engraving. So now we're finished with the design. Okay, so that's the basic design on Vetric Aspire. What I need to do now is prepare some material. Now all I've got to work with is this, which is a bit of dodgy old pine, but it should be alright when I've finished it. It's actually a bit of a sideboard, not a sideboard, a bedside cabinet. So it's got some holes on this side, but this side should be okay. Obviously engrave it, sand it, stain it, la la la. Okay, what I've got to do is chop this down to the size that we specified on the design, and then we can start doing some engraving. Okay, so now my material is securely mounted nice and square on the CNC machine. I've marked the center point just using a couple of crisscrosses from corner to corner. I've set my CNC machine to 0 at that point, so in theory if I push this button it should go to the middle. Okay, so what we've got to do now is load the G-code we created in Vetric Aspire into this software, and then we can start carving. Right, so once we've got Mach 3 open, what we have to do is find the G-code that we created earlier on. So we load the G-code. Okay, we locate, well, first of all we're obviously going to do the large text, so we look through our files to find the large text. It's here somewhere. So this is actually G-code that we created. It's in there somewhere. There it is. Okay, so we open that and it loads, and you can now see the design there. On the left hand side here is the actual G-code, and on the right side here is what it's going to look like. just push the center so that's actually centered on the board, and these X, Y and Z coordinates are set in my 0, and then all I have to do is push this start button. Okay, and if I want to stop it, I can push either the reset or the stop button. Okay, so the first pass of the main text is now done. What I have to do now is change the bit in the CNC machine, load the second lot of G code, and then start again. Okay, so that's the main engraving done on the CNC machine. What I've got to do now is, before I start sanding this, because obviously in a previous life this was a bedside cabinet, so it's covered in varnish, but I'm going to use that to my advantage. What I'm going to do now is colour some of the letters and then sand this off afterwards. Okay, on the actual sign here, where it says the Sidings, that's in a light grey. The workshop and the rest of the text is all in black. So what I'm going to do is do this in light grey, okay, and I'm basically going to fill up this in light grey, and what I'm going to use is some epoxy resin with a little bit of colour in it. Okay, so I'll pour that in, let that set, colour the rest, sand it off. That's the plan. Okay, so I've made the first lot of resin. I poured that into the main text. It's not quite as dark as I'd hoped. In the tub it looked this dark, but in reality it's this dark. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm just going to quickly go over where it says Workshop with this, which is an acrylic paint pen. Okay, just going to basically go through that quickly and then leave all this to dry overnight. Right, so that's the resin in. That's the first bit of paint on the workshop and the rest of the text. I'm going to leave this now overnight, let it set, and then have a look at it again tomorrow. Right, so this has been dry for a week. This is now the next Saturday. The problem is, it's just not dark enough. It's come through a little bit too light, see-through. I did put some colouring in it with some mica powder, but it's just not dark enough, so by the time I sanded it, it's not going to show out. So the only way I can now get this resin out is by recarving it, or starting from scratch. So what I'm going to try and do is get this back in the CNC machine in exactly the same position, and then try and recarve the words. And then I've bought some new mica powders, all sorts of different colours, and then I'll try and do it again. So the first challenge is get this back in the CNC machine in exactly the right place. What could possibly go wrong? Right, well, I must admit I am astounded. Yeah, I'm not surprised, I'm astounded that I managed to get this back in the CNC machine a week after I did it. I've used the CNC machine for other things since. I managed to reset it, and then recarve it in exactly the same place. Now I'm impressed. So that's my OOZNEST CNC machine that I built about 5 or 6 years ago. It's fantastic. Right, what I've got to do now is mix up some silvery grey resin and fill this the same as I did before. Right, so I poured this yesterday. It's still a bit tacky. It's nowhere near ready to sand, so I can't do anything with that until next week now. But what I'll do is address these holes in the back, because this was an old bedside cabinet. It's got loads of holes in it, and what I'm going to do is cut some plugs and fill those. Okay, so what I'm going to do to cut these plugs, I've got a set of these plug cutting things from ALDI's, I think it was. Yeah, ALDI's. These are Ferrex. The holes are 8mm. Okay, each one of these is 8mm. So what I'm going to do is use an 8mm plug cutter and a piece of the offcut that I cut off the original board, so then I can try and match the grain. Right, let's get this in the drill. Okay, so I've quickly sunk those with the hole cutter. All I have to do now is cut them off on the bandsaw, and that should give me a load of little plugs. Let's see what happens. That'll do. Right, so another week has come and gone. I'm finally got back out in the workshop again now. I've got a couple of hours to finish this off. So the next things I've got to do is obviously chop off the infills I put in here, and then I can start sanding this down. The only thing I've managed to do is where it says workshop, I've repainted that, and then I've given it a quick coat of lacquer to try and keep it a bit shiny. Right, so my next bet is chop these off, sand this. Let's go. Right, so I think that's all the cutting, engraving and drilling and sanding, that's all done. What I'm going to do now is put some wax on it. I'm just going to use some natural creamed beeswax. I was going to use some Danish oil, but I don't know what colour he wants it, so I'm just going to put some wax on it. If he wants to stain it, then he can sand it off and then colour it himself. So I'm just going to whack a bit of this on and then buff it off. Okay, so that's it. It's finally done. After weeks and weeks of trying to get this thing finished, it's a simple thing, but it's taken me a lot longer than I expected. It's come out okay. The resin has finally come out okay. It's the right sort of colour. The finish is not bad, considering it was an old bedside cabinet. The engraving is all good. I had to go over it again, which was quite a interesting thing. On the back, I've got my little token and of course a little message. So hopefully he'll get this in his workshop now. So this is Dan from the Sidings Workshop. You'll find him on Instagram. Check him out. He does some really good stuff. Right, I'm going to get this in the post, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. Now today it's quite a... Let's try that all again, because that was completely rubbish.